taxpayers to the work that you do. Thank you very much for that. Right, we're now at item number 12, and I'd like to ask Ian Maxwell and Graham Ross to come forward. These are matters, item 12 is the Health, Safety and Wellbeing Update, referred by the Audit and Risk Committee. And maybe, I was going to ask Daniel, but I think he's out. Maybe I can ask Bill Cashmore and Shane Henderson to move and second this item. And Ian, if you'd like to speak to it.
Yes, look, thank you very much, Your Worship. So look, the report primarily deals with the period through to the end of October. I'll cover a couple of other issues as we go through. And yes, it was considered by the Risk and Audit Committee earlier this month, so I'll be fairly brief in terms of running through things. So look, following a review, a range of changes have been put in place concerning the activity of health, safety and wellbeing across Council. We now have a full department reporting through to the Director of Group Services and a new General Manager position, and that those will be filled into the new year. And there's a whole range of other initiatives underway. And when we sat down with the Audit and Risk Committee at their next meeting in February, we'll be workshopping those actions to ensure that the priorities meet their expectations around this activity. We are working across the wider council group, so that workshop will include how we are working with our CCOs as well. Through this year, we've sought to monitor staff wellbeing through 2 surveys. This was a new initiative this year, and it really reflected the concerns of COVID at that time. So the surveys took place in the middle of the COVID lockdown and then subsequent to that, and it did identify a number of concerns around sense of belonging, connection, stress levels, perception of well-being, and just the way that our organisation and our people managers communicate with teams, particularly those who are working at home. And we have followed up, speaking to a number of staff about those matters. And look, it's the result of quite a wide range of impacts upon families, the economic situation in general, our confidence about the future, as well as issues like working from home. So it's a mix of work issues as well as issues affecting them as individuals. Over this period, we have seen a return to normal levels of demand for our Employees Assistance Program. So that fell away during lockdown, but it is now heading back towards normal levels. And basically, this program provides access to a whole variety of counselling and advice services. We've also identified and sat down with a number of individuals who had perhaps more complex and serious situations. And in that instance, what we do there is we pass them to more professional services that are operating outside of council in the sort of general health services. So, Your Worship, today I'm not going to address the matters directly associated with the recent unexpected deaths of Jay and Jenny. Those deaths will be subject to an investigation by an independent authority, the coroner, and this is normal in any situation such as that. There's also a second independent authority, WorkSafe, and they may also choose to investigate, and clearly we will work closely with either of those 2 agencies around those sorts of investigations. But what I will say is that we ourselves shall undertake a review of our policies, our processes, our procedures regarding sort of mental well-being in relation to work. The terms of reference for this are still being finalised, and the work will commence early next year, and it will be reported through to the Chief Executive with key findings and actions for implementation. So it's not directly related to either of the deaths, it's more of a general approach. We have proper agencies in our country to deal with specific situations, and those agencies will undertake any work in that regard. In November, Council responded to a request from the government by closing its offices and operations in the city centre, and that was the result, you might recall, of a community spread of COVID within the city centre. And we actually have some great experience, as you would expect, moving between the alert levels earlier this year. And look, the move at that time in terms of the city centre went very well, and that included not just council but the wider council group as well. And we've established contingency plans now should alert levels change during the upcoming holiday period. We've also tested and exercised how we would respond if a staff member or a customer tested positive to COVID, and we have those procedures in place, ready to go. And we're also holding good quantities of personal protection equipment. And again, we share those across the wider council group, sharing equipment and resources as needed. I think each of us are aware that our experience during COVID has significantly improved our capability to work from home. And for those staff who do have the option of working from home, and that's not all of our staff, we have many people who are working in libraries and pools and community centres who don't have that option. But for those who do, working at home has continued at high levels. And this does present a number of issues from a health, safety and wellbeing perspective. In short, the home becomes a workplace, becomes a council workplace. And the issue is, to what extent is that council's responsibility? And look, we are not alone in looking at this issue. Organisations right across New Zealand and indeed the Western world are facing that issue. And next year we will be looking, and I suspect working in association with a number of those employers across New Zealand, at what the situation is and what our responsibility is. Up until now, we have tended to treat it as a temporary phenomenon, but I think we're clearly moving into a more longer term situation. Over this period, we've had 2 incidents that were notified to WorkSafe, and investigations have been completed by Auckland Council with respect to that incident which occurred at the Henderson Waste Transfer Station. The station is actually one of our more hazardous operations. There's some significant risk that takes place there, and we've got quite a history of incidents that have occurred at that station. So as a result of that, we will be commencing work driven out of the Waste Solutions team, but involving others from across Council, and developing proposals that will look at options for the redesign of the layout of that station, the operations that take place there, as well as the adjacent areas. Council actually owns some adjacent areas occupied by the animal management facility, and so we'll be looking at the total package as to whether we can actually create a safer environment there, and those first proposals will be available by the end of February. Over the period, the number of recorded incidents has reduced compared to previous periods. So we've seen a reduction in lost time injuries and medical treatment injuries. And on the face of it, that's a good outcome. Again, we believe that may be associated with increased working from home, but the outcome itself is good. We've also been concerned, and you'll see in the graphs in the report, that the time taken to resolve incidents has been creeping back up. So that is an issue for us, and we'll be focusing on managing that down in the first quarter of next year. You might notice too that the nature of the incidents has not changed, and the significance of aggressive behaviour remains very high. We're responding with training, lockdown drills, liaison with the police, safe rooms in many of our community facilities. And outside of this particular period, we've also been working very closely with the police and with respect to our services and facilities and our people serving those communities where some of the gang tensions in the city have been particularly high. And I'll come back to you at our next report dealing with how we've responded to that. So look, I'll stop there, and if there's any other questions, I'd be only too pleased to respond.
Thank you very much for that, Ian. Could I just acknowledge that you've been appointed Acting General Manager, responsible for health, safety and wellbeing as a result of the October 2020 review. So thank you for taking on that extra responsibility. If I just begin with a question, it was COVID-19's obviously had a huge impact in ways that we are aware of, and perhaps subtle ways that we're not aware of, but one of them is a lot more people working from home. And how has that affected our ability to maintain oversight over of the health and the well-being of the employees who might be connected electronically, but we're not seeing on a regular enough basis physically?
Yes, look, that is an issue that we've identified, and I think we're not alone in identifying that issue. The significance of some form of face-to-face contact to get a general view of how people are at is important, and we are certainly working with our teams to promote that, to bring teams together back into the office on a more regular basis. But we have got people managers within our organisation that have developed some great initiatives in that regard, and we're also spreading that around to ensure that our direct people managers keep in touch, keep connected, encouraging people to maintain some sort of liaison with their work colleagues. But it's an ongoing issue.
Thank you very much. Now, if we just keep this first session relating to questions only, and then we'll come to comments if there are any. Councillor Linda Cooper.
Thank you, and congratulations. My question is around the Waitaku transfer station. With that accident, was that a staff member involved? Because I know that it's workplace health and safety, but I just want to know if that was a visitor or a staff member.
In this particular instance, it was a staff member, but our focus is not on just staff.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to ask you, that because it is, I've had many reports, including my husband, that say those barriers actually make it more unsafe because people trying to lift things, they can't get them over the barriers, and they're supposed to get them over the barriers, but it's actually hurting people because they can't get their rubbish over there. So that's really what I was making sure, that it was not just about staff, but about customers as well, using that area.
Yes, it's definitely about customers.
Thank you very much.
Staff, and there are ways. I mean, if you go to a modern transfer station, you don't have people walking out amongst the heavy vehicles. So there are ways, engineering and design methodologies you can deploy to make it inherently safer.
Very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pipacoon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Kia ora, Ian, and thank you for the work that you're doing around health, safety and wellbeing, especially at this difficult time. I have two questions, if I may. The first one is about, I think it's been raised in different forum about the concern about what budget cuts pressures are putting on staff and the extra stresses, and also just additional work that we're getting from government loaded onto council where we're not perhaps resourced. And I just wondered where we're getting visibility of that in terms of audit and risk, in terms of this reporting. I know it comes through slightly on the quarterly reports and the emergency budget, but I just feel we haven't really got a good sense of what our decisions are having, the impact our decisions are having on staff. And I raise this also because it came up at the Waiheke local board meeting last night, where Chair Handley addressed that to the meeting, that they did an acknowledgement for Jenny on at their meeting, and Chair Kath talked about this real concern about the cutting staff is having additional stress and causing concern. So I just would like to know where our visibility as governors is going to be around this issue.
So look, thanks very much. That's a great question. In terms of measures of workload, and so they're very difficult to nail down for individuals or teams, but that is something that we'll be working on. That is something we'll be workshopping with the Audit and Risk Committee early next year. At the moment, we rely on things such as leave, sick leave, those sorts of things. They're probably too general, and we'll be putting more work into trying to identify areas of workload. But I know the executive leadership team and the management of our organisation, that's an area of focus, and we can expect to see some improvements in terms of measurement and how we respond to those issues going into the new year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I had just, if I may, a second question, a quick one. Yep. But sorry, just to clarify, so that will be reported through the Audit and Risk Committee?
We'll be workshopping alternative ways initially, and then we'll have to develop some measures for it.
Thank you. And just sorry, a quick part about, I don't want to be the class monitor about the climate impact statement, but again, we've got a very strange interpretation of what that statement is about. And so in the report, for example, it's talking about working from home, which actually has a clear impact on our group emissions and our commitment to our goal of reducing emissions. So there's a perfect little statement that could be in there, rather than writing this report did not involve any climate change. So I just wondered, I know this is work in progress, but are steps in place that we're going to start rethinking what this statement is about in the writing of reports.
It's my fault. I apologise. I will ensure that that's better presented next time. And I'm sure there are steps in place, but I probably just did not take advantage of them.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Ian, the people working from home, often in different circumstances, we have had instances reported to at risk of the wrong equipment and not supported properly. And I asked you at the Audit and Risk Committee, what will be changing around our procedures and permissions to allow people to use council equipment, supporting equipment in their private residence?
Yes, that's one of the issues that we need to look at. At present, we provide, as an organisation, a safe place to work at work, and people have a choice, and it depends on essentially negotiation. Is it good for the organisation, good for the team, good for the individual? But there is a safe place to work at work, and so the issue is how far does one go as an employer in terms of ensuring the health, safety and wellbeing of a person at work when they have an alternative here. And that's the sort of debate that needs to take place, and some decisions made about the extent of responsibility by an employer such as council for staff who are working at home on a more frequent basis.
So if I may, Mr. When is that decision? I imagine it's an ELT decision. When will that be made, do you know?
We were looking to work through that in the first quarter of next year.
Thank you. Last question, Councillor Wayne Walker.
What you're doing is really great, Ian. I'm making the assumption that in respect of the things that you're developing, that there's a separate but related set of support for councillors and local board members, because essentially we fall outside this, but equally we've been working at home, sometimes perhaps more so than officers, and obviously there's the issue around the support and so on that we receive, and quite obviously our workplaces that are not a council responsibility. So I'm making the assumption that there's a carryover for us and local board members. Do you want to make a comment on that?
Yes, I think that's a correct assumption. There's so I'm sure we can talk about who's an employee and who's not, and where elected members fit, but clearly you're part of this organisation, and we need to ensure as an organisation we support you. And I know many of you have similar sorts of issues in terms of aggressive customers or aggressive community members. And I think that's certainly something we need to talk about. And I know a number of you have highlighted situations, even in a room such as this, if you're dealing with a very difficult topic. It's a very open area, and we may need to think those things through as well.
Thank you very much. Just before I move to comments, if there are any, I just want to get a sense of the room. We've got two more items from Audit and Risk report backs, 13 and 14. 15 has been withdrawn, and 16 and 17 are simply summary of information. Would you like to take a break at the end of this item and come back half an hour later, or would you like to finish the agenda? Keep going? That's okay. That was the answer I was hoping to get. Right. Any comment on this? If not, sorry, Al Filipina.
Thank you, Your Worship. Ian, I want to thank you in regards to now hearing you got the new role, because I remember a conversation you had, I think it was last year, about retiring. So, so look, congratulations, and I think more importantly, thank you. Thank you for taking the role on, and look, I just look forward to the work that you'll be continued. So that's it, Your Worship. Thanks.
Thank you. And Ian, retirement's much overrated. Councillor Angela Dalton.
Thank you. I did want to congratulate Ian as well. You're the right person for this job. I was able to ask all of my questions at Audit and Risk, my second favourite committee after Value for Money. I want to congratulate the organisation on the attention that it is putting into our people, particularly and specifically the impacts of COVID and working from home, and importantly going forward, the impacts of the savings that we're finding that will impact on staff and their health, mental health and well-being. So I look forward to what you're going to bring after the workshops, but congratulations, Jim, on ensuring that this is really getting its attention and that we have the right man for the job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor John Watson, last comment.
Thanks. I just want to make a few general comments, Mr Mayor, before I get to some of the specific items. And the first one really goes to our position as officers in terms of health and safety under the Health and Safety Act. One of the first pieces of paper we're given at the start of each term is this outline of our responsibilities as it goes to ensuring council's primary duty to ensure people's safety. One of the parts of it talks about ensuring the council implements processes for complying with any duty are carried through on, and it specifically says to elected representatives what you need to do. It's not, what you may do, it's what you need to do. The first thing is to analyse information you're provided, which I assume that's happening to a greater or lesser extent now. Ask for more information if you think you need it. I don't know if that happens too often. And this key phrase for me, which is repeated throughout this document on a number of occasions, ask searching and probing questions. Searching and probing questions. I don't know if that has occurred too often, and the reason I say that is that in the last term of council, with one of these similar items, for me anyway, there's a rather disturbing revelation from one of the health and wellbeing surveys where in 2017 there were over 20% of the employees that have been surveyed in this organisation who had some issue going to depression or anxiety. That to me, without having any comparative to other big organisations, I took as a bit of a red light. The subsequent follow-up in terms of probing and searching questions from the assembled multitude here, myself included, wasn't exactly thorough, and it took quite some time actually for that item to, in the first place, to come back, and secondly to get any sense of what organisational response there was to what I thought 20%, 1 in 5 is a disturbing statistic by any account. In the past, in terms of sensitive issues, if we're going to staff health and wellbeing, when they've come up before some of us, it's actually been very difficult to plot a course which those people might take if they come to you in confidence, or if they come to you in as part of some anonymous plea, as has been the case on a couple of occasions. Actually, how to assure the degree of independence and anonymity that anyone with any sense of experience, employee relations knows is fundamental for people being able to say their piece, to be able to tell what's happened to them, and to have some confidence that people are listening and following through on it. And I say that in an organisational sense, not from people sitting around here largely isolated from the 98-99% of people who work over there or work in other workplaces around Auckland, which I have, and I'll be the first to admit it, have very little insight into their daily experiences in terms of co-workers, in terms of managerial pressures, in terms of dealings with the public. It just doesn't occur. So I think some of the information that heard from Ian today in terms of the own council investigation, I will be interested to see what comes out of that. When I read the report before us today in terms of well-being, the first part of it concentrates around the COVID-19 period and people's experiencing there, and that kind of working from home, that sense of belonging, as you would in some ways respect, has decreased. Stress has conversely increased in relation to COVID-19. I don't think council employees will be unique in that. And one of the encouraging aspects is the degree of self-reflection from the organisation, saying that some of the communications have been less than effective, and that the organisations go looking to deal with that. I guess similarly with the small number of people that have been dealt with at point 30, that will be statistically inevitable in a big organisation too, that sorts of personal issues to do with stress and depression come in. That's a consequence of having such a big workforce. But the one I really wanted to concentrate on, and I don't think has really been adequately addressed at any time, is really the specific pressures in this organisation at the moment as they go to the impact of a kind of recession and job insecurity, which is particularly relevant when you are the only organisation for that employment. So for a lot of other people, they don't have a choice. The 8 legacy councils have gone. This is it. If you lose your job here, there's lots of consequential flow-ons that didn't exist before the super city. So I guess in terms of those probing and searching questions that are meaningful to the people involved, that is the staff, not necessarily the people around here, I'll be looking to see how we're addressing that combination of job cuts, that reliance on this council as the only employer, and also to do with the kind of power structures that have been enabled by the super city in terms of the hierarchy and the ability to enable people to have independent and objective and safe recourse when it goes to their own job, and how they may be being treated by any number of people, but particularly people from within the workforce. So I thank you for that, Ian, and I, for one, in the future anyway, will hopefully fulfilling a little bit more of that role that's been outlined to us at the very start of the term by the Health and Safety Act. Thank you.
Thank you. And one further speaker, Councillor Richard Hills.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to, through you, Chair, thank the team, especially the ELT members, Jim, Patricia, Phil and Ian on this. Patricia has updated me along the last couple of weeks about this process as well, and I think it's really good for us to be going on this track. I don't think any of us, I've been sort of pushing on this a couple of times. Ollie, at the beginning, I remember a couple of years ago, previous health and safety manager, found it difficult to get some of the promotion side of it, and I think the last couple of years we really have ramped up the focus not on just physical health and risk, but the mental health and well-being side, and we definitely are moving forward on that at pace, which I think is really important. The other thing is, and yes, I have been vocal, but a lot, sort of an overwhelming number of staff have contacted me on this, and I just want to ensure, I guess my comment, it's not a question, that the channels are as open as possible, and I know you're committed to that, Jim, but the channels are open as possible for people to report, people to put their concerns forward and have that time out, also without feeling that it may affect future job prospects while there's redundancies and things going on, because I know that balance for some people, whether it's a real fear or not, can be difficult. So I've been kind of overwhelmed by some of the comments of people who have left or changed jobs within the organisation because of maybe a public-facing role or a role working with some elected members or local boards over time, or very tough issues that we all face as well. But just want to say, I know this has been a big body of work for a long time, and we really are pushing ahead, and all of us support doing whatever we can to help. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So the motion is that we note the update and that the report has gone to local boards. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Item number 13 is also a reference from Audit and Risk. It's the annual report on the performance of the Audit